When you look at art, your brain has a certain elasticity that's not used in any other way. So, as this analyst said to me, neurons that wire together fire together. So if you look at art together to think about creative problem solving, they're going to wire in that same way, thinking about art as that template. So just the act of looking at art brings your brain into a new place where it hasn't been before.
Today's guest on the Keynote Curators podcast is Amy Herman. Amy is an expert on visual intelligence and a two-time New York Times best-selling author, as well as a remarkable keynote speaker who's been featured on the maiden page of TED Talks. In our conversation today, we're going to discuss how Amy uses the methodology of viewing artwork to expand people's critical analysis and leadership skills in their profession and everyday life. It's a fascinating conversation, and you're going to be smarter for it. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate you being here on the Keynote Curators podcast. Okay. So welcome to Curated Insights with Seth Dechtman. Our special guest is Amy Herman. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you very much for having me, Seth. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it is a pleasure to have you here. This is a conversation I've been looking forward to. I love working with you. I love booking you. I know every client that we send you out to, you take great care of, and they're not only incredibly blown away, but they are shown things about the world, about themselves, and how they view the world in a transformative way, in a whole new way. I think horizons open up. I've seen it happen in person. And I know that that's a big bang of a start, but I like to kind of jump right into the deep end right off the bat. Many know you as a TED Talk speaker, as a keynote speaker extraordinaire, as a best-selling author. You've done a lot of work. You worked at the Frick Museum, is that right?
Yes.
And you've trained and developed all sorts of professionals in every possible industry.
Yes.
I do want to talk about your new book, Fixed. But before we get into that, I want to talk a little bit about visual intelligence. But here's where I'd like you to kind of zero in for our viewers, our listeners, our learners is, visual intelligence is a big, broad subject. It informs mostly everything we do. Mostly everything. It informs what we do in a really powerful way, how we perceive things. And the entire planet is experiencing something new together, a pandemic. And specifically in the workforce, there's the Great Resignation, there's the hybrid work model, there's the work from home work model, there's the I'm not going to be working right now model, and everything in between. Share with, enlighten us, impart what you see from the work and distinctions that you provide with visual intelligence.
It's a great question. It's a great place to start because my first book is entitled Visual Intelligence, and I've given a lot of thought to what that really means. And, the subtitle for my presentation has, in many cases, has been Seeing What Matters. And to add the word now, seeing what matters now, because as we've all undergone this seismic shift in every aspect of our lives for the last 18 months, I'm going to come back to a quote from Henry James. He said, try to be the person on whom nothing is lost. And, that's something all of us need. I want to be that person on whom nothing is lost. And when the world is shifting around me 1,000 miles an hour, how do I know I'm not going to lose something? And the idea of visual intelligence is engaging not just with your work, but your world and all of your stakeholders and your family so that nothing is lost on you. That's how we remain effective. That's how we remain on the edge. And it also prepares us for the next big thing that's going to happen because the pandemic, I'm sorry to say, look, we now have Omicron, how are we negotiating all these new changes? So what I do basically is I use art as a way to introduce the concept of visual intelligence. People always say, well, how can I be more visually intelligent? It's about filtering out the noise and seeing what matters. And so I am a recovering attorney and an art historian, and I like to think I combine the practical aspects of both of those disciplines, legal analysis and visual analysis, to help people see what matters. And I can't believe I'm going to give you yet another quote, first Henry James's quote, but just yesterday.
Well, the Henry James quote was quite a high bar. So I'm a little bit off.
Try to be that person on whom nothing is lost. But this one it really applies to me and all my stakeholders. My busman's holiday is to go look at art. So on the Sunday of Thanksgiving weekend, I went to see this drawing show down in Soho. Soho, so crowded with all these people. And I walked in and my world was transformed. And there was a label on the wall. And they had me from the get-go. You know what it said? It said, how we look at art is fundamental to what we see.
Now, wait a minute. That almost sounds like a prop that was placed almost like a candid camera. They knew you were coming and they tailored it for you.
I'm telling you, I read the label and I said, I took a picture of it on my camera. I said, does that really say that on the wall? Like, they were introducing this show of drawings, which was beautiful. And when it talked about how we look at art is fundamental to what we see, that's my whole thing. That's my whole professional way of being. I mean, so what I do basically is to teach visual intelligence. I use art as the data, because nobody's using art to think about how to do their jobs more effectively. And with this new book, Fixed, I want to go from using art as the data to using the creative process to help us solve problems. So that's what visual intelligence is. It's filtering out the noise. It's seeing what matters. And I couldn't think of a more apt time where we need our visual intelligence in every aspect of our lives than right now.
Right. And employers are grappling with that.
Absolutely.
I'm just kind of sticking with this through line for a little bit further.
They are.
They're seeing, how retention, how to develop, how to expand the capacities, how to keep people, there's the word engaged, interested, feel that people are getting developed professionally and there's opportunities to expand and move ahead in their careers. And this skill of seeing what's there and dealing with what's so, and nothing getting lost on you, meaning seeing what you typically don't see, is an important skill. How do you see that for employers when they're grappling with these employees that are dealing with the Great Resignation?
I would say that there is a prelude for visual intelligence that is specifically applicable for employers. And it's a concept that I talk about in my presentation since the pandemic. And the concept is to meet people where they are. You can't, everybody knows you're the employer, everybody knows you're the boss, but employers need to remember, meet people where they are. That's what a good leader does. And so how do you do that? Well, you're not going to be able to put yourself in their shoes, but you think about what your company, what your stakeholders, what your employees have been through in the last 18 months, and what are they really up for? What do they have the bandwidth for? To say, okay, we're going to institute all new rules, meet them where they are. Every company is different, and every company has instituted new policies since the pandemic has started. That concept of meeting people where they are, saying to them, okay, you know what? I'm meeting you in the hopes that I can listen to you, but that we can have a dialogue and you're going to listen to me. It's not just the word from on high. You have to, as a good leader, you need to go out there and meet people.
Yeah, I could see that. And I've heard that quite a bit. Meet people where they are, which requires the metaphor, reading the room, having a sense, having the ability to see, right? And not having those things get lost on you, because each department, each employee or team member is in a different place. And they all have their unique circumstances from home as well. What about turning it on the other side of the coin, Amy? What about for those who are either seeking, recently resigned, or are still maintaining their employment, and, the utility or the application of the core virtue of visual intelligence, not having something lost on you and really seeing what's there? How can that be applied from their angle?
I'm going to say that there's also a prelude for those who are looking, those who are resigning, those who are seeking. Before you look at art, you have to look someplace that's a little bit harder. You have to look in the mirror. I believe that self-perception is critical to personal and professional growth, and you need to know where you're coming from. Everybody looks back at the last 18 months, and I say that there are some silver linings of this pandemic. There aren't many, but there are some. And I think we need to carry them forward. We need to turn those into gold, but you have to be able to talk about what worked for you, what didn't work for you, what you really want to leave behind. And don't go into another position saying, well, I can try it. If it didn't work for you and you know that, say it out loud. Be able to articulate what you see in the mirror, because everybody has had this, as I said, a seismic shift in not just their work environment, but we all learn things about our own productivity. Some people are amazed at how much they got done at home. Some people have said to me, I'm never going back to the office. I'm never going back to the office. And if my employer says I have to,
Right.
that's the end of this job. And those are serious words for people to throw out there. So I think that what employees and people that are out there and on the receiving end of, the employer-employee relationship need to look in the mirror and really be able to prioritize first to themselves, but then to their employers, what is important, what is paramount importance to them, and take it from there. Because while I said that employers need to meet people where they are, so do the employees. If they value their jobs and they love what they do, they have to be able to say to their employers, this is what got me through the pandemic, and this is what I want to continue doing, and this is what I need to leave behind.
Yeah, and the upside is, fortunately, that conversation is available. Whereas in the past, if pre-pandemic, somebody had come and said, "Hey, this is what I need," there might not have been as much of an open listening. And when you say, at least that's my editorial, but when you say, "Look in the mirror," I can't help but think in the context of who you are and what you do and the world you live in, it's a self-portrait.
Absolutely.
And self-portraits can, I'm almost thinking of a selfie. Which one do you post? Because there are things that can get lost on yourself from yourself, even in looking in the mirror. And it requires a real honest accounting of what's so. That's a challenge.
It is a challenge, but one of the things, to use old corporate speak, to use pre-pandemic corporate speak, which I don't like to do, but it's really apt here, is when you look in the mirror, this is where you have an opportunity to ask yourself, am I of the growth mindset or the fixed mindset? The fixed mindset says, well, I'm good, I'm talented, they've hired me to do what I do, and I'm going to bring it to this company. But the growth mindset says, yeah, I'm good at what I do, they've hired me, but I need to keep growing, I need to keep innovating, because otherwise I'm going to get left behind. And I need to grow for myself and for my company. And so by looking in the mirror, it's not a cause for panic to say, I don't want to look in the mirror. But I tell people, you can't take a self-portrait with your eyes closed. You need to keep your eyes open, and you need to look in the mirror and look at yourself honestly and candidly. Mirror and look at yourself, and not only tell yourself what you see, creating that self-portrait, but tell your employer that as well.
Right. And you can't just select the selfie that makes you look the best all the time, because that's not necessarily an accurate depiction or an image of what's so.
That's right.
Right. Little social media, a dig there.
You can use a couple of filters if you want to. Those are available, and nobody will know, but don't, don't make it so that when someone sees you in person, you don't look anything like the selfie that you sent.
Right. And it does impact one's own self. But again, we're getting into more of a social media editorial. Another exciting thing that had me anticipating our conversation is that you have a new book out. It's really exciting. I know you've been working on this literally for years. It's transformed, as most books do, over time, from an idea to the final idea. So why don't you just tell us, start from the beginning, its title and everything.
Terrific. Well, thank you. First of all, I'm going to make the analogy that writing a book is like having a baby. You get pregnant, and then you're nauseous, and then you start to get fat, and you're thinking about it, and then you're eating all the time. And before you know it, you're going into hard labor, and you're pushing and you're pushing. And when the thing is born, you hope what you hope for all children, that you put something out in the world that will do some good, that will make the world a better place. And so I've just given birth. The book is called Fixed: How to Perfect the Fine Art of Problem Solving. And it's not Visual Intelligence 2.0. The first book came out in 2016, and that was about using art as data, how we can rethink our observation, perception, and communication skills by learning to analyze works of art. And now I've taken that to the next step, where how can we look at the artist's creative process and use that to solve our problems, from minor annoyances with our colleagues to intractable dilemmas about, are we going to sell this company? Are we going to keep the company? And using that as a template, because guess what? Everything's broken. And when I started writing the book, as you said, I've been doing it for years. I had no idea that the pandemic was coming. We're more broken now than I ever believed we could be. And so the book took on additional significance and gravitas as time went on. And I'm actually going to work backwards and tell you that I took my first foray. I did some international travel at the beginning of October. I went to Paris. And the reason I went to Paris, I did go for work, but I also went to see, and for your listeners or viewers who don't know, the Arc de Triomphe was wrapped in material by the artist Christo. Christo's traveled, for many years. He and his wife wrapped objects. And Christo died last spring. And this was his last project in his studio. And I want to see it with my own eyes. They decided to execute it to actually make this happen. And they put it off once for pandemic, and they wrapped the Arc de Triomphe in September. And I said, I'm going to see it with my own eyes. And it was life-changing, Seth, for a very simple reason having to do with the book. You know, you don't mess with the Arc de Triomphe. It's the French everything. You just don't mess with it. And here this Bulgarian was coming in and was going to wrap it.
Right.
And
it's the anchor of all that they believe in.
It is. And the French term is la gloire, the glory for the French. Right. Don't mess with it. Anyway, it's all of Christo's projects are ephemeral. So it was up for 2 weeks. I went for the last 3 days, and it was sheer joy. Perhaps because we've had this forced isolation and seclusion, but to see all these French people coming out, and it wasn't just the French, it was tourists, and they were hugging and kissing, and the traffic was closed, and people were gathering. But even more importantly, I was there when the Ark was unwrapped, and I watched it come down, and I watched all the wrapping be taken down and for the Ark to emerge. And I realized something. When I left, I took pictures day and night. I was staying around the corner, that if you can wrap the Arc de Triomphe and then unwrap it, it's never the same. Even the Arc de Triomphe was changed. And so my idea when I came home back to the States was nothing is immutable. No problem is so intractable that it can't be changed. But if you put enough forethought into it and you work through the red tape and you keep the big picture in mind, and I don't know if you can notice this, I'm wearing a tiny little Arc de Triomphe around
Yes.
My family got this for me when I came home. They found it for me. It had such a profound impact. And I was lucky enough, I was escorted to the top of the Arc de Triomphe, the French National Police, while I was there. I went to the top to see Paris through this wrapped. It was so powerful for me.
Wow, lucky you.
That I wear this around my neck. And so I tie that into the book because everything can be solved. If you can wrap the Arc de Triomphe and then unwrap it and the world is changed, it's never going to be the same way. Just like we're coming out of this pandemic, we're never going to be the same. So I wanted to give my readers and the viewers a template to know that, yes, we're facing these unbelievable problems, but there is a new way to look at them and solve them.
Right. And the process, I'm digesting everything you said. It seems to me that the process is the vehicle by which you communicate the ability or the tools that are used to resolve these fixed problems, whether they're minor annoyances, nuisances, or intractable. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. And in fact, the book is divided into 3 sections to analogize it to art. The first section is called prep. The second section is called draft. And the third section is called exhibit. And it follows a painting from the 19th century, The Raft of the Medusa by �12𝘯𝘰𝘪, this disastrous raft, and this terrible event that happened off the coast of Mauritania, and how the artist �12𝘯𝘰, how many problems he had to overcome. And it was politically fraught. And to make this huge painting, all the problems he had to overcome, and to follow �12𝘯𝘰's process and how the painting was ultimately exhibited, not only in Paris, but in London, and all the problems he encountered and how we can learn from that artistic process to solve our own problems along the way. Prep, draft, exhibit.
And some of the problems I would gather, I'm excited. I know you have sent me a copy and I've actually pre-ordered a copy. So they're going to be waiting for me when they arrive.
Yes.
But it would seem, as you mentioned, there were political problems, which is outside of the art.
Yes.
Although connected, but how to execute the vision, the materials, the choices that you want to make, whether it's the color or what to put which figure where, or, again, I'm talking, just trying to imagine it. But, that is no different, Amy, than with your family or at work, where sometimes the problems have to do with the content of project you're on or outside forces that have nothing to do with the substance of it. And there's still problems.
That's right.
And they can seem intractable and they still impact the work. Is that the access that you're providing for us in this new book as tools? Talk a little bit about that.
Yes, it is the artistic process, but some of it is the old-fashioned idea of common sense. My grandmother used to say, common sense is not a flower that grows in everyone's garden. And it's not. And the idea of common sense, that the idea of making preparatory sketches before a work of art is actually executed. Thinking, taking the time to articulate the problem, to think about the problem, to articulate, the hurdles that you're going to encounter, so that when you have unintentional or unforeseen hurdles, you'll be able to divide them and to make everything digestible. But the theme that runs through all of this is the idea of listening, listening to your subjects, listening to those around you, and getting multiple perspectives, because to formulate the best solution really involves multiple perspectives. I mean, 𝘠𝘯𝘯𝘪𝘯𝘀 and all the artists that I talk about, they talk to so many people, they're engaging in the world, and what you see as the final work of art is the final manifestation of their problem solving. So much has gone into it. So I really try to leverage this creative process to apply it to corporate problem solving, because they're really not that different. And when you come up with a solution, quite often it's a work of art.
I can't wait to read it. And I loved your first book so much. I still love your visual intelligence keynotes and visual intelligence now. But one thing just struck me, what you said was the listening, taking a moment to kind of digest it and go, it makes sense. But at first blush, you would just say, wait a minute, listening. This is visual. These are artists. These are painters. These are sculptors. These are people that make stuff. Where is the listening in there? But if you slow down for 1 second and not just looking for Pollyanna people who love what you do, but really listening, that's incredible input for that final product. And it's the sum of all of that. In fact, even if one disagrees with what they're hearing and may not even use it because it truly doesn't align with the work, it still would fortify the other side of the coin, if you will. So I just find that interesting. And we find that in the corporate world all the time, don't we?
We do. And, one of my mentors, and I don't even know what the original source of the quote was, and I use this all the time in visual intelligence as well, says that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, and we should use them proportionally. I really believe that leaders are great listeners and they know how to laugh, having a great sense of humor and being able to listen. And, one of the exercises that I do in my presentation is I'll have, people pair off. One person has to close his or her eyes, and the other has 45 seconds to describe a work of art to the person whose eyes are closed. And you feel vulnerable when your eyes are closed and you're relying on somebody. And so I'm not only testing their descriptive skills, their ability to articulate, but what I tell them is, before you start talking, take 3 to 5 seconds and just look before you open your mouth. Just look at what you're going to be describing before diving in and giving your partner this, this whirlwind description. Take 3 to 5 seconds. Don't say anything. Just look and then describe. And that ability, that's really hard for leaders. That's very hard for people because they just want to, time is always of the essence. Let's dive in. Let's get this done. But with real problem solving, what's the Latin phrase? I'm throwing all these quotes at you. The Latin phrase is festina lente, to make haste slowly.
Aha.
Make haste slowly.
Right.
What did you say to me at the beginning?
John Wooden, be quick, but don't hurry.
Yeah, be quick, but don't hurry. Same thing. Festina lente. Make haste slowly. We all have time constraints, but if you don't do them purposefully or mindfully, you're going to have to go back and do them again. And so that's part of the problem solving template that I give people. Take the time to listen, to think, and then to articulate.
That's great. Because, for those that don't live in the art world, again, the last time I was in Paris, not to name drop, my wife and I was for my 50th, we went to the Rodin house, right, on Rue des Invalides, right? And what was first of all, how prolific, right? Like just the quantity, just in the garden alone, forget even the house, but the amount of drawings for the hand sculpture, like the amount of charcoal that surrounded it. And I'm sure it was like 1/100th of what he probably actually did.
Right.
But it was just, there were dozens of fingernails, digits, the top hand of the finger. All of that went into, and that's the prep, right?
It is. That's exactly right. And the problem to solve is depicting the sculpture that Rodin's eye and mind sees in so many facets that we don't. So for him to solve that problem, he had to break down the hand and the fingernail and the joint and the skin over and over again until he had to prep and then do all that prep by drafting until he could put the final work of art together.
Right. And that's exactly what we do in our business lives with our teams and with our staff and with our leadership is, practice and draft until you have the final product. And that requires listening, which is the foundation of communication, right?
And that's what makes us human, right? That's what makes us human, the ability to go back and rethink and reconsider and refine. So problem solving, it's not anything it's not rocket science, but I'm just giving people a new way to look at it. And here's something else I learned from one of my intelligence clients, that when you look at art, your brain has a certain elasticity that's not used in any other way. So as this analyst said to me, neurons that wire together, fire together. So if you look at art together to think about creative problem solving, they're going to wire in that same way, thinking about art as that template. So just the act of looking at art brings your brain into a new place where it hasn't been before.
Have you presented a keynote yet with Fixed?
I have.
You have.
Or I should say, I've made it, I've done an all-day session with the group. And because the book was not out yet, I had a large component of it in the afternoon called Getting to Fixed, New Lenses for Creative Problem Solving.
Which it seems like that's a common thread in this book is there are so many distractions, there are so many problems, there are so many barriers to executing from draft all the way to exhibiting that how do you keep the focus? And, you know, whether it's the listening or collaborating, that's also seems the common thread there. I want to hear from you, keeping in mind with all the hundreds of speeches that you've done over the years and the tens of thousands of people that have seen you present, literally, knowing meeting professionals and the world that they live in and everything that they have to do from chief bottle washer to chief cook and everything in between. What could we impart in one of these curated insights, being in their world, that would be valuable and pull them into the book Fixed?
I'm going to analogize that professional group, meeting planners, people who, as you said, have to wear every single hat there is. And I'm going to put them in the same category. And I do this very respectfully as shock and trauma nurses. Why? Because they have to triage all the time. When you have a meeting, you have a conference, you have 500 different things that you are taking care of. And one of the reasons I love working with shock and trauma nurses is there is no filter. They will tell you the truth. And when you are planning a meeting, tell me now what the problem is, and let's figure out how we're going to solve it. Because you have 5,000 people flying into this city. Not only do you have to make sure that all their meals are there, but all their rooms are ready and every speaker is lined up. You have so many micro problems with under the overarching umbrella of putting this whole conference together. And I think, like the shock and trauma nurses, you learn to triage, but most especially for that group, what I started this talk with, you have to be the person on whom nothing is lost. You have to have your eyes and ears open all the time. And I mean, I know these sound like platitudes, but for them to see what matters now, they need to know what has to be done now. And most importantly, they have to know what they can delegate, because everyone has limited resources. Know what you can fix, know what has the potential to be fixed, and know what you can't fix and get rid of it, give it to somebody else, because too many people are riding on your outcome. And so I think there's a lot of applicability in how to break problems down, because I think problems are just baked into the whole profession of meeting planning. It's just what they're trained to do. And any arrows that we can put in their quiver can really help them, because look how they've had to change from Zoom to virtual meetings and now putting our toes back in the water in person. They are triaging and, they're creating a great work of art. When that conference is over, that meeting is over, their work of art is on display.
Yeah, I say often meeting professional, because miracle worker doesn't capture it enough.
It doesn't. It doesn't. What they put out there that people take for granted, because they're the ducks that are swimming smoothly and they're paddling, like hell under the water. And so I think about them and all the problems that need to be solved and any tools that we can give them through this process. I think it would be really relevant and very applicable for them.
Great. Well, stay tuned, because there's more to come on that. Is there anything else that you think we should cover that we haven't yet, or that you'd like to impart?
Yes, I think that what I tell all of my participants, my groups, my stakeholders, and my readers is that you should go into every new experience preparing to have your eyes opened when you didn't even know they were closed. That's how I want them, when they think about, oh, I'm going to go look at art. No, think about coming out with your eyes opened in a way that you didn't even know they were closed. And once you go into that mindset, you'll be amazed what you come away with and how profoundly it can change the way you engage, not just in your professional world, but in your personal world as well.
Is there a piece of artwork that you often use when you make that point in one of your speeches?
Yes, I do have. If you look at this work of art and you're immediately caught, you stop in your tracks and you look at it. And your first thought is, that's so incredibly beautiful. Beautiful doesn't tell me what you're looking at. What is it? And it's just a simple drawing of lines, but it's a face and it's an expression and an eye and it's eyes. And when you look at it, you realize that it's just a few lines, but the overall effect that it has on you, it opens your eyes and your mind in a way that if I said, oh, take a look at this drawing, it never would. And it's analogous to our situation every day. Every day has the potential to open our eyes and see things for more than, they're greater than the sum of their parts. And I have one particular drawing that I saw yesterday where I read, how we look at art is fundamental to what we see. So I do have a drawing in mind.
That's great. If you'd like to learn more about this speaker, visit our website at thekeynotecurators.com. There you'll find dozens of videos of speakers that are a perfect fit for your event. If you'd like to reach out directly, please click on the link below in the description. My name is Seth Dechtman, and you've been watching Curated Insights.